In this video, we're going to be solving quadratic equations another way. And why would you need several different methods? Because sometimes one method works better than another. Such as, if you remember the last ones, anytime that we had like a number out front or an odd number here, we had to factor that number out, or we had to take half of that and square it and complete the square, and it was just a horrible problem. So let's look at other ways. And this is a much better way when that's the scenario. It's called the quadratic formula. And here's the actual formula. This is just a formula that we can plug in values into, and it spits out an answer, and it tells us what our answers are. So here's the steps for using the quadratic formula, and I'm going to throw another step in. Step number one, we're going to write it in standard form. Ax squared plus bx plus c. Notice, this is very important, what your a, b, and c are. A is the number in front of x squared, b is the number in front of x, c is the constant. That's the three values you're going to be plugging into the value, which is plugging into the formula, which is step two. Plug a, b, and c into your formula. Identify them, substitute them in. Now here's what I do. I do b squared minus 4ac. It's called, and we'll talk more about it later, it's called the discriminant. I do that stuff first, and to me it makes the problem so much easier if you'll go ahead, and that's the ugliest part of the formula. Do that first, and it's going to make the whole thing easier. Then we're going to simplify, and we're done. So step number one, x squared plus 2x minus 63. Your a, b, and c value. A is 1, B is 2, C is negative 63. None of the x squareds and x's with it, just the numbers. So the first thing that I like to do is the b squared minus 4ac. Let's take our a, b, and c values, plug it into this formula. First off, my b value is positive 2. So you have 2 squared minus 4. And let's do this. I like to go ahead and multiply 4 times a and times c all in the same step as I plug it in most of the time. So 4 times a times c, if you multiply that together, that's 4 times 1, which is 4, times a negative 63. That's going to be a negative 252. And then when I do my 2 squared, that's going to be 4. So 4 minus negative, minus is a plus, and I get 256. That's the stuff in my formula. If you look back at the formula, that stuff is under the radical. So what I'll do is once I do b squared minus 4ac, I'll go ahead and put it under a radical, and I'll clean it up. The square root of 256 is 16. So now I'm ready for my formula. X is equal to negative b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That is the quadratic formula. We're going to plug in all the a's, all the b's, all the c's. So as we plug that in, x equals negative b. Again, identify your b. That's 2. So you have a negative from the formula, 2, plus and minus. Wait a minute. We've already done all this. The square root of b squared minus 4ac, we did that right here. That is 16. All divided by 2 times a. A is 1, so 2 times 1 is 2. Now let's clean this up and find our two answers. X is equal to, our first answer is negative 2 plus 16. That's going to be 14 over 2. That cleans up to 7. That's one of our answers. Our next answer is negative 2 minus 16. That's a negative 18 over 2, which gives you negative 9. That's your second answer. So there's your two answers. That's your two roots. Number 2. Again, the part of the formula I like to do, let's go ahead and write the formula down. Negative b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. That's a 4, all divided by 2a. And again, I like to come over here and do b squared minus 4ac. Here's a, here's b, here's c. So b squared, just as we plug it in, why not go ahead and square it? Negative 11 times negative 11 is 121. Put your minus sign. And let's do 4 times a times c. And you can type it straight into the calculator if you want to. 4 times 6 times negative 10. 4 times 6 is 24 times negative 10 is a negative 240. Now notice I have two minuses. This minus came from the formula. This minus came from 4 times a times c being negative. But minus makes a plus. When you add those two together, 121, 240 is 361. And that stuff is under the radical in my formula. The square root of 361, and the square root of 361 is 19. So now let's plug everything else in our formula. X equals negative b. So that's a negative 11, which is going to be just 11. 11 plus and minus, I've already done all this. The hard part, it was 19. Over 2 times a, which is 6. 2 times 6 is 12. There's your two answers. The first answer is 11 plus 19, which is 30 over 12. We can't divide that, but we can reduce it. Divide by 6 and 6 gives you a 5 and a 2. There's your first answer. 11 minus 19 is the second answer, negative 8 over 12. Won't divide, but again, can reduce. Divide top and bottom by 4 gives you 2/3. There's your two answers. Number 3. Now here you can leave the a value -1, or you could move everything to the right side to make it a positive x squared and all that. It really doesn't matter. We'll just leave it. We do need to move the 1 over with it, so -1 is equal to 0. Let's first do b squared minus 4ac. In our formula, let's write it down every time just to get used to the formula. Negative b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a, because I want you to see it so much that you memorize it. Your b value is 2, so b squared will be 4 minus 4 times a times c would be 4 times -1 times -1, because that is a times c. 4 times -1 times -1 is 4. So that is 0. And again, that's the part under the square root. The square root of 0 is 0. So that's different. So the square root stuff is 0. So now let's plug in everything else. B is 2. So you have -2 plus and minus 0 over 2 times -1 is -2. When you take -2 and you add 0, you get -2. When you subtract 0, it gives you -2. So regardless, the one answer, you're only going to have 1 here. The one answer that you get is -2 divided by -2, which is 1. Now, how could you, remember back from graphing, how can you get just a single answer for a parabola? Remember that? If it touches, if that's the vertex. You could actually test this and see that, well, that x equals 1 would also be the vertex or the axis of symmetry. That'd be the x value of the vertex. So the single answer there would be 1. And you also get a hint. Notice that my b squared minus 4ac was 0. If you add 0 or you subtract 0, you always get the same answer. So anytime that you have a 0 there, that's going to tell you you're only going to have one answer. The next one, let's move everything to the same side, -2x squared. When you subtract 4x, that's going to give you -1x. When you subtract or add 15, that's a plus 15. Now, if I were trying to factor this, I would move it to the other side because I really don't like that -2x squared, or you could factor out a -1 either way. I don't like that leading coefficient be negative. Now, with a quadratic formula, it does not matter. First step, b squared minus 4ac, part of your formula, which again, your formula was -b plus and minus square root of that b squared minus 4ac, which we called the discriminant over 2a. B squared, here's b, -1 times -1 is 1, minus, from your formula, 4 times a times c. 4 times -2 is a, times 15. 4 times -2 is -8, times 15 is a -120. Minus minus makes a plus, that is a 121, that's under the radical, so it is 11. So your square root stuff is 11, so now let's plug in everything else. X equals -b, -1, that's 1, plus and minus the square root stuff, which was 11, over 2 times -2, which is a -4. So your two answers here will be x equals 1 plus 11 over -4, that's going to be -3, or 1 minus 11 over -4. That's not divisible without a decimal. Negative divided by negative is a positive. 10/4 you can reduce to 5/2. So -3 and 5/2 are your two solutions. Number 5, move everything to the same side. Gives you 9x squared. When you subtract 24, it gives you -25 is equal to 0. Now, honestly, your best methods here, since you're missing a b term, the best method would be move the 25 over, divide by 9, and take the square root. Anytime you're missing that b term, it's much easier to solve this by taking a square root. Another method here, this is difference of squares. You could factor this into conjugates and work it that way. That's also going to be a good method. But since they want us to use the quadratic formula, let's go ahead and use it. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Let's do b squared minus 4ac first. Notice you don't have a b. The b term's missing, so b squared will be 0 minus 4 times 9 times negative 25. 4 times 9 is 36 times a negative 25 would be negative 900. Minus minus is plus. 0 plus 900 is 900. That stuff is under the square root. Square root of 900 is 30. So again, your b value here was 0. So you have x equals 0 if you want to put it. Don't really have to. Plus and minus, the square root stuff gave you 30. Divided by, your a value was 9, so 2 times 9 is 18. So you have 0 plus 30 and 0 minus 30. Let's start with our 0 plus 30. Let me scroll down here. 0 plus 30 is 30 over 18. When you reduce that, don't divide it. Reduce it by 6 will be a 5 and a 3. Or when you do 0 minus 30, it gives you the same answer, just negative. And it's going to reduce to the exact same value, just negative instead. And again, the reason for that is because those values would have been conjugates if you had done the factoring. Okay, the next one, number 6. Now again, this one, quadratic formula is hands down the worst way of solving this because notice you're missing a c term now. This is much easier to factor. You could factor out a 2x, and it's going to be really easy to solve this with factoring. But again, we will solve it using our quadratic formula. A is 8, B is negative 10, and I'm going to write somewhere up here C is 0. So let's do B squared minus 4AC first. Here's your formula. X equals negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC. If I say it over and over, it'll stick. B squared minus 4AC. Here is B, so B squared will be 100 minus, it doesn't matter, C is 0. So 4 times A times 0 is going to be 0. So 100 is your discriminant. That's the stuff under the radical. The square root of 100 is 10. So here we go. X is equal to negative B. Here's our B value. Negative 10 will be a positive 10 plus and minus. The stuff, radical stuff, is also 10 over 2 times A gives you 16. So there's your two answers. Your first answer would be 10 plus 10, which is 20 over 16. Reduce it by dividing by 4 gives you a 5 and a 4. Your second answer would be 10 minus 10, which is 0 over 16. 0 divided by 16 will give you a 0. So there's your two answers. Number 7. Move everything to the same side. X squared minus 4x minus 9 is equal to 0. X is equal to negative b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Let's do b squared minus 4ac first. Your a value is 1, your b value is negative 4, your c value is negative 9. So b to the second would be negative 4 times negative 4, minus from the formula, 4 times 1 times negative 9. 4 times 1 is 4, times negative 9 is a negative 36. Minus minus is a plus. That gives you a 52, which is the stuff under the radical. Now the square root of 52, this one's different. I can't do that. I don't know what the square root of 52 is, but I can simplify it. Let's break it into root 4 and root 13, which is 2 root 13. So that's going to be your radical stuff in your formula. Now back to the formula. X equals negative b, here's your b, negative 4 is 4 plus and minus the radical stuff over 2 times a, your a value is 1, so 2 times a would be 2. Now here's what you're going to do here. This is not going to simplify on top. 4 plus and minus 2 root 13, you cannot combine those. However, on this problem, now sometimes this works, since you're dividing by 2, we can use the distributive property. We can divide both of those by 2 to clean the answer up a little bit. We're going to do 4 divided by 2 plus and minus 2 root 13 divided by 2, the distributive property. And you're going to get, when you do that, 4 divided by 2 cleans up. plus and minus the 2 root 13 divided by 2. The 2's will cancel and leaves you with just the root 13. So there's your 2 answers. And you cannot combine 2 with root 13, so you're going to leave it. You could change it to a decimal, but we're just going to leave it like it is. Okay, number 8. Again, move everything to the same side. Negative 2x squared. Let's move our 8x over. Whoops. By subtracting 8x. Let's move our minus 1 over by adding 1. You get plus 18. Now, again, I noticed something here. All of these are even numbers. This equation is reducible. Please, to make your life so much easier, to make these problems much easier on you, if something is reducible, go through and divide everything. You do have to use the 0 as well. Divide every term by the same number. I'm actually going to divide by a negative 2 here, and that's going to get rid of that negative out front as well. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1x squared plus 4x. 18 divided by negative 2 is a negative 9 equals, it doesn't change the 0, but you do need to make sure that you are dividing everything by the negative 2. So again, we're going to do our b squared minus 4ac first. B squared is 16 minus 4 times 1 times negative 9 is a negative 36. Looks very similar to the last problem, which we also got 52, which is under the radical. And we already know that that's simplified into 2 root 13. So our quadratic formula, negative b plus and minus the square root of stuff, b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. We can now do x equals negative b was 4, so negative 4 plus and minus the radical stuff, which is 2 root 13, divided by 2 times a. The a is 1, so that's going to be 2. We're going to use the exact same distributive property we used on the last. You don't have to actually break it up, though. If you just want to say divided by 2, divided by 2, negative 4 divided by 2 gives you negative 2, plus and minus, bring it down. 2 root 13 divided by 2, the 2's would cancel and leaves you with just the root 13, which again looks very similar to our last problem. Number 9, everything gets moved to the same side. Negative 8x squared, subtract 4 gives you plus 3 equals 0. Again, the best way of working this, since you're missing the b term, would be to move everything over and take the square root. However, let's go ahead and finish it out. Your a is negative 8. Your c is 3. So in this problem, I don't have a b. So remember that b is equal to 0. So let's do b squared minus 4ac first. 0 squared is 0 minus 4 times negative 8. That's negative 32 times 3 is a negative 96. Minus minus is plus. So I get 96. That's the stuff under the radical. Let's simplify that. That's going to be root 16 times root 6, which is 4 root 6. Let's plug it now into our formula. Negative b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. So that's going to be x equals, again, our b value is 0, so negative 0, that's going to be 0, which you don't even have to put, plus and minus the square root stuff, all divided by 2 times a. The a value is negative 8, so 2 times a would be negative 16. Let's clean this up. Let's split it actually. 0 plus 4 root 6 would be 4 root 6 divided by negative 16. You can't divide, but you can reduce the 4 and the 16. That's a 1 and a 4, so that's going to give you positive divided by negative is a negative, root 6 over 4. And then the other one was 0 minus 4 root 6, which would be a negative 4 root 6 over negative 16. And you're going to do the same thing. Negative divided by negative is a positive. 4 over 16 reduces and leaves you with a positive root 6 over 4. So there's your 2 answers. Okay, number 10. Step number 1, let's move everything to the same side. Negative x squared plus 10x, we just have to move the 8 over by subtracting. So there is your a value, your b value, and your c value. B squared minus 4ac. B times b is 100 minus 4 times negative 1. That's going to be a negative 4 times negative 8 is a positive 32. So you have 100 minus 32, which is 68. That's under the radical. We're going to divide that. Let's see, that'd be root 4 times root 17. And there's no other perfect radicals here. That's as simple as you can get is 2 root 17. Your formula now, negative b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So x is equal to negative b, our b value is 10, so that's going to be negative 10 plus and minus 2 root 17 over 2 times negative 1 is a negative 2. We're going to distribute that, so let's split it. You get x equals, let me try again, negative 10 divided by negative 2 is a positive 5. Now here's the thing, when you do plus and minus and you divide it by a negative, it's going to give you negative and a plus. So it really doesn't matter that you change these, so you can leave them as plus and minus. 2 divided by negative 2 will give you a 1. They would cancel each other out. And again, even though it's positive and negative divided by negative, this takes care of the positive and negative here. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. They cancel root 17. There's your two answers. Number 11. Everything is already moved to the same side. And I've got a funny feeling about what's going to happen here. I think I know. Here's A, here's B, here's C. When you do B squared minus 4AC, B squared is going to be 64 minus 4 times negative 3 times negative 7 is a positive 84. And exactly what I was thinking, 64 minus 84 gives you a negative 20. That's the stuff under the radical. Look what you've got. You got the square root of a negative, which we now know is an imaginary number. We're going to split that into the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 20, which is going to be I times square root of 20. We can split again as root 4 times root 5. So that's going to be 2I root 5. So this is going to be a complex answer. So now plugging into the quadratic formula, negative b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. So you have x equals negative b, here's my b value, negative 8 plus and minus 2I root 5, all divided by 2 times negative 3 is a negative 6. Now it's just simplifying. A negative, we're distributive property, negative divided by a negative is a positive 8 over 6, which we can reduce. Plus and minus, you don't have to worry about the sign here divided by negative. 2 over 6 reduces to 1 over 3. And there is the 1 right there still, so there is your answer. You could also leave that intact. Here's another way of simplifying this. You can actually just take it and divide all three of these terms by negative 2, and that would have gave you 4 plus and minus I root 5 all over 3, which is another way that you can leave that answer. Okay, number 12. Let's move everything to the same side. You have 5x squared. When you move the 4x over, it's now minus 4x. Move the 5 over by subtracting gives you plus 4. Here's A, B, and C. So b squared minus 4ac, b squared will be a 16 minus 4 times 5 times 4 will be 80. 16 minus 80 is a negative 64. That's the stuff under the radical. Split it into square root of negative 1 times the square root of 64, which is an 8 and an I. So that's kind of neat. That cleaned up much better. So now quadratic formula. Negative b plus and minus the square root stuff, b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. So you have x equals, the b part is a negative 4, so that's negative negative 4, which is 4, plus and minus the square root stuff, which was 8i, over 2 times a, which is 5. 2 times 5 is 10. Now let's use the trick that I just showed you. You could go through, here's one method. You could take all three of these terms and divide them by some sort of common factor. All three of those are divisible by 2, so you could do 2 plus and minus 4i over 5. That's one way of reducing it. Since it's a complex number, though, I like to have the real part, the imaginary part, so let's actually split it. 4 over 10 plus and minus 8 over 10i. That's going to be 2/5 plus and minus 4/5 I. That way you have, here's my real part, here's my imaginary part in that complex number.